Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Omega Metroid podcast. My name is Dakota Lasky, aka Dax City. I am here with my man Doom will cross. Doom, how are you doing tonight, my man?
I'm doing pretty great, you know. I've unfortunately had to step away from the podcast for what feels like a lot longer than it probably has been. I think we've only done like what three episodes or so without me since then, but it feels like it's been months since I've made my last appearance. But we've just been grinding away, and it's all been going to a good cause. For next week, I will finally be holding my bachelor's degree in recording and
Nice.
audio production. Very excited to finally be there. And unrelated as well, but all of you listening right now are listening on Tuesday probably. However, we are recording on a Sunday, so I just want to say Happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful mamas out there, for putting up with our stuff, for raising us. Y'all the real MVPs for real.
Yes, happy Mother's Day. Congratulations on your graduation. That's awesome. And yeah, welcome back, everybody, to the show. It is the weekly Metroid show here at the Omega Metroid podcast and OmegaMetroid.com, which if you haven't checked it out by now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the link below. You can check it out. We have all the best guides, news, and so much more. Reviews, obviously the podcast. You can check out the Patreon as well. And this week on the show, we're talking some more Metroid. We're actually jumping back to Metroid Prime Remastered, which I'm sure is still on everyone's minds, as it's still a relatively recent game, at least, for Metroid fans. I'm sure it's at least on the minds of many. And it released back in early February, and just recently Nintendo released, I don't know what the best word for it would be, but their fiscal year earnings report essentially came out, their financial results from the past financial year for Nintendo, and we finally got our first big sales numbers for Metroid Prime Remastered, which is something that we've been looking forward to for a little while, to see how the game has performed, especially not only on its own, but against, Metroid Dread and other games on the Switch. So we're going to jump into that today on the show. We're going to talk a little bit more about Metroid Prime Remastered, and we're going to, share our thoughts, what we think about the sales, what they were, how they kind of figure into where Metroid is on the Switch so far. Before I jump into that, though, before we all jump into that real quick, what have you played Tears of the Kingdom, Doom? Have you played it
I
yet?
haven't. I was hoping that I could get some
Okay.
time in the last couple days or so, but I haven't so far. I'm probably not going to be able to get around to it until Tuesday, when you all are actually listening to this podcast. That's
Okay.
probably when I'll finally be playing it. But yeah, I already had it pre-ordered. It's sitting right there on my Switch, tantalizing me. So
So you
yeah.
do have it. You're just waiting
Yes.
to jump in.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So have you seen any clips or comments? I know you avoid spoilers entirely, but I'm interested if you've even maybe seen a little bit of gameplay since people have gotten their hands on the game.
I saw one funny meme clip, and I don't think I can describe it. I don't think that content is
I
safe
know
for
what you're
this
talking about.
podcast.
Yeah.
I,
Okay.
I think you know the
I think
clip
I
I'm
know what
talking
you're talking
about.
about.
But I got a good laugh from that one. If you know that one.
I know what you're talking about, and I've seen a lot of that stuff, and I don't know how I feel about it. On one hand, it's like, wow, this is actually like really cool. It's like Legos, it's like Minecraft, it's like you can get, really crazy. I mean, if I was one of the developers of Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, I'd be like, wow, inspired by Banjo and Kazooie episode right there. And but on the other hand, it's like, is it a Zelda game? I don't know. I hate to go as far as to say, like, is it a Zelda game? But when I look at it, I'm like, it doesn't. It almost feels like if I were to be playing it, it wouldn't scratch the Zelda itch to me. It looks like a really fun game, but like, it doesn't look like a really fun Zelda game to me. If that makes, I don't know. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. So I'm gonna give it a try myself, but I'm curious to see what your thoughts are there when you finally get to play it earlier this week.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'll
Yeah.
actually have free time, so yeah.
And Andy, of course, is busy covering the game. I think he's played, I'm sure he's played by now 40, 50, 60 hours of the game, I'd have to imagine. I'm sure he's every waking moment he's been playing the game. So I hope he's enjoying it. I hope everyone that is playing is enjoying it. It does look like a lot of fun. I think I'm debating on whether or not to pick it up, because I will be leaving for a vacation in the middle of this coming week, and I'm curious if maybe it's worth picking up Zelda and maybe playing it on the flight. So yeah, looking
That
forward
sounds
to
like
that.
a sounds like a chill game to play on a flight, if you ask me.
I'm not sure if you're being sarcastic or not.
Well, yeah, it's a chill game. You just you relax, you build some stuff.
Because the crazy clips I've seen on Twitter look anything but relaxing. So, like, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, no, it looks honestly.
I mean, for the exploration aspect, I think that would make for a good flight.
That's true. Yeah, I see. I loved Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and back then I was like, this isn't really a Banjo game. It's a really fun game, and that's kind of.
I think that game is underrated. I agree with
I
you
agree.
there.
I like that game, and so that's kind of how I look at it. I'm like, I don't know if it really looks like a Zelda game to me, like gameplay wise. Obviously, aesthetically, it does. But it looks like a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to giving it a try, but I have not picked it up just yet. Anyway, let's jump into Metroid Prime Remastered, and I guess as a whole, this big result. So I mean, there's like the whole earnings report, right? Which I don't think we're going to jump into. Maybe we can jump into it on later in the show. But really, the salient stuff we want to talk about here is revolving around Metroid Prime Remastered. But we got a lot of numbers on how the Switch is doing several years into its lifespan, right? So it's kind of crazy. The Switch has now been out for over half a decade. It's what, like 6-7 years old now. Like it's now.
Yeah, it's on the 7th year right
Yeah.
now, I believe.
So
If my math is correct, which it usually is not, but I believe it's on the 7th year.
I'm relying on your math, so I can't say anything. But I'm sure, and I think there's been some talk about it, is Nintendo, how Nintendo looks at the console now that I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, hardware sales I'm sure aren't gaining every year now, right? And they're kind of relying on these big software releases to keep traction going. And it's interesting how things kind of are playing out as, once again, Switch 2, Switch Pro, speculations coming back in. And Metroid Prime 4 is a game that I've even seen kind of now, like, oh, if there's a new Switch, if there's a new console, it might even be a launch game for it. It might even be a launch title, which I think has been kind of part of the discussion. But
yeah, I feel like that's always been a part of the discussion.
It's been part of it, but I think now it feels more like,
yeah,
like not concrete, but like more likely. And something I think I would be okay with, because at this point, I think if they come out with a new system, it's going to be backwards compatible, right? Like if it'll be like Metroid Prime 4, I would assume is going to come out on the Switch and for the Switch 2 or Switch Pro, whatever it is my guess.
To be fair, this is Nintendo, and if there's one thing you can count on Nintendo doing, it's the opposite of the obvious decision that would make them money.
I agree, but like
that means I do think the next console will be backwards compatible with the Switch.
Yeah, I think it has to be. With the amount of people that own a Switch, there's just no way they're gonna. I just don't see how they could expect the amount of people that bought a Switch then also buy a Switch too. I just can't see that. So
I feel like if it wasn't backwards compatible, I feel like that would just be like a death sentence for the next console.
It would be. I really think it would be. Yeah. So with that in mind, maybe Metroid Prime 4 goes that way. But more specifically, we got the first global sales results and data for Metroid Prime Remastered. So let's just contextualize this, right? So Metroid Prime Remastered came out at the beginning. I want to say it was like the beginning of the second week of.
It was like February 8th, I believe,
February 8th
right?
or 9th, yeah. So Shadow dropped during that Nintendo Direct that happened that day. It was only available digitally for the first 2 weeks of its avail window, and then became available physically. So these results, by the way, I feel like I've seen people say that these are only digital results. It's physical and digital from this report. So it says so right on the chart that these results are on. So it's physical and digital. But remember that the digital sales were ahead of physical by 2 weeks. Game only costed $40. But these results are only for essentially 3 or 4 weeks of February. 2 of those weeks were only digital. And then March. That's it. These are all the sales from just about 2 months. Less than 2 months. And in that time, globally, Metroid Prime Remastered, over 1,090,000 copies of Metroid Prime Remastered were sold globally for the Nintendo Switch. So this was, pretty big news that I think a lot of people in the community, at least people who kind of care about, just the general well-being of the franchise, wanted to see more, are more than a casual fan. We're looking forward to seeing how this game performed. Certainly no one wanted, if they're a Metroid fan, especially if they're a Metroid Prime fan, don't want to see bad results coming out of this, because as much as Metroid Dread sold millions of units, nothing is, tomorrow's not guaranteed, right? While things are great, like, who knows when the next Metroid game is going to come. So I wanted to talk about this today, Doom, because you specifically had a very different opinion than me out of the gate on these results. And I was curious if you still had those feelings about a week later, and then if you do, why, and if you don't, why not?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned out of the gate because, after that first day, so I guess let's go through the series of emotions because basically where I stand right now is I think these are good. I think these are just objectively, not in my opinion, objectively good results. I think it's a I think it hit about expectations of what you'd expect like from the Metroid series. I personally am a little disappointed just because I personally wanted more. I wanted this game to like maybe shatter into unrealistic expectations. I was hoping, maybe that like, hey, 20 years later, the internet, everyone raving about it, maybe that word of mouth will get out more.
Mm-hmm.
The Switch has a bigger install base than the GameCube did, so maybe, especially after the momentum of Metroid Dread, maybe, that will help carry it forward. Not quite. It's sold about on par what you would expect, a Metroid game to sell at,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. That's what we want. We want it to sell on par, and this is objectively good, and that's fine. What I will say though, and a lot of people are not bringing up this part, and this is more into the positive realm as well. You know, we've been we've been having this debate for about 2 years now on whether or not we consider Metroid Dread sales a success. I'm on the side that thinks it absolutely is. I believe you are too.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had these conversations with people who I respect, by the way, so no shade against them. But I've had conversations with a lot of people about this, and if anything, I feel like these out of the gate 1 million sales for Prime just further emphasizes how much of an incredible success that the 3 million sales for Dread so far is in the Switch's life. And I imagine that's where it's gonna peter out at the near the end of the Switch's lifespan as well. But even still, I think that just puts into further context just how great that number is.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of take for granted how, what it means to sell 1 million units of a game, right? Like the Switch is wildly popular, but like not every game is Smash or Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey. Like those games sell tens of millions of units, right? But there are, there are thousands of games available on the Switch. I want to say less than 100 of those have sold 1 million units, right? To sell that many is in and of itself, I think, for any franchise, good, right? Shows that there is a demand worthy capitalizing on, right? For Metroid Dread to sell 3 million copies in a genre that truthfully is not like super popular compared to other genres, like in the grand scheme of the industry. 2D Metroids, like, still, aside from Samus Returns, haven't had a ton of games. The franchise really didn't have a big footprint on the system at the time. 3 million units for Metroid Dread, I think, was really good.
And full price. Keep in mind, most of the games in this genre are like a third of the price, like maybe $20 at most.
Absolutely. And then you look at Metroid Prime Remastered. I mean, look at all the things that were against Metroid Prime Remastered. Not against it, but just the circumstances of it, right? So again, digital only for 2 weeks, then became physical. The sales only being tracked for about 2 months. No marketing, pretty much. I mean, it was
physical copies being hard to find.
Well, physical copies being hard to find for sure. And then, like, unless you like go on your Switch menu actively, like to look at new stuff, like, or you're on Twitter, you might have seen a YouTube pre-roll ad. I'll be honest, I saw a few paid ads on Reddit for about a week or two, like here and there. And to be honest, they were probably geared more towards me because of my interests on Reddit or whatever it is, right? Like, who knows how other people might have seen them. Not a lot of push compared to Dread. Not a lot of push at all.
Yeah, I remember seeing Snapchat ads for Dread, and that just blew my mind. I was like, what year is this?
I mean, Dread had like these big video releases, like a whole treehouse segment. I mean, it had a lot of stuff behind it. It had like a lot of social, like a whole social campaign around it. It had, I think, a TV commercial. Like it was a whole thing. Metroid Prime Remastered had none of that. I think a big thing is too, Metroid Dread was released just before the holiday season, if not at the beginning of the holiday season in 2021. Metroid Prime Remastered was dropped in the middle of February. Christmas is already months over. There's not another major, consumer holiday coming up until another several months out, really. So it's dropped then. There's no big holiday push for it. And I mean, at the core, at the end of the day, Metroid Dread was a completely new game. a game that people have been waiting for decades. Metroid Prime Remaster was a remaster of a 20-year-old game. And I think in the context of that, as much as Metroid Prime is a fantastic game and I think one of the best games ever made, for a lot of people, especially younger players who might not have grown up on Metroid Prime, it might be a bit dated to them, compared to maybe more modern FPS. For all of those things against it, for it to still sell about like a third of what Metroid Dread has, I think is pretty successful.
And even just, kind of, almost the way it's titled. I mean, when Metroid Prime Remastered, during the first episodes of the podcast, we were debating whether or not we would consider it a remaster or not, just because of, the amount of overhaul the visuals got. But that's coming from people that have played the original release, who have that comparison to make. A lot of people, they don't have that comparison, so they probably just see remaster, and they probably, maybe they see like a few seconds of a clip, and it's like, oh, it probably doesn't look that much different than the GameCube version, not knowing the generational leaps that this new version has over the previous version.
Yeah, and then it just, how the game is built, right? It's a single player game. If you're not really invested in single player FPS games, it might not speak to you, right? If there's no multiplayer component or FPS doesn't work for you and all that, like those could be kind of accessibility things that just might not make you want to invest in playing in the experience. And if Nintendo's not trying to sell you on it, really, it's kind of just trying to sell you on name alone. If you really don't know the name, which as much as Metroid Prime is a really well-known name, it's not, as flat out well known as some other titles.
I think it's well known in the gaming community, but outside of the gaming community, like in your general, like if I ask my roommates right now, hey, have you ever heard of Metroid Prime? I guarantee like maybe one of them might say yes. Otherwise, it would be full no's across the board.
Yeah, exactly. So it's and that's, I think, speaking to it too, is that just on name alone they sold 1 million copies. I would say, like, people saw Metroid Prime Remaster and that was enough to sell 1 million. Like, I think that's saying a lot, really. And I think the Shadow drop too, right? No lead in. If you weren't watching the direct, you might not have even known it came out. So that's another kind of lead in too. Dread, even though it had only 3 months or so of lead in, still had a lead in, and it was a big part of kind of Nintendo's summer releases at the time, or like summer announcements of upcoming releases at the time.
Yeah, it was kind of the launch title that accommodated the Switch OLED model too.
Also a good point. Yeah, that's another great point. It was kind of tied to that as well. So people looking to make hardware purchases were also enticed to make a software purchase with Dread.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, like that game is like especially good looking on the Switch OLED screen too. So you almost think that like maybe that title was created with that specifically in mind.
Yeah, and it's, I actually saw some people talking about this recently, how some people were debating like, oh, was it like an official Metroid edition Switch or not? And obviously it wasn't.
It wasn't, no.
But like just the opportunity, like if I were to just slap a couple like image JPEGs in there, just throw an Emmy image on the side and like a Samus and sell it as the Metroid edition, boom.
I mean, I would have bought it, but to be fair, like I will literally buy anything with the word Metroid on it.
Yeah.
Proof by my sealed copies of Other M and Federation Force.
Sealed Federation Force goes hard, man.
Sealed,
I need that.
Sealed US and European release, since they have different covers.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, oof. And we were just talking about this recently because those two different covers I feel like, weren't we talking about how the European cover is actually kind of good?
Yeah, the European cover goes hard. I like the European
cover.
Is
actually not bad.
Despite the terrible art style in general, like the actual cover and the way it's outlined and framed, like it's so much better than the US cover.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we've done it. I think we need to do a cover art, game cover, like definitive ranking for the series, I think, at some point.
Oh, absolutely. That is absolutely happening someday. I don't know whether or not we should do that before or after Prime 4, but that's definitely something I want to do someday.
Maybe we should wait for Prime 4, but that might be a long time coming. Real quick, too, I think something to also put into consideration for both Dread and for Metroid Prime Remastered, and I think just a lot of games in general. Just I think of the options people have on the Switch and for games these days. I looked it up. The Switch literally has, according to the search I did, over 4,400 games available on it. Like, that's the amount of options you have that you could play on your Switch. I'm not sure if that's inclusive of like original games, or I'm assuming it includes eShop or whatever, right? But compared to like Metroid Prime back in the day, the GameCube, I think, had only a total of maybe 600 games in its lifespan. So like that's a completely different option right? Like a massive difference in your options in terms of, I mean, there's no backwards compatibility on the GameCube, and Metroid Prime was a launch game too. So you kind of have that in the back of your head. I think especially the later you go into Switch's like lifespan, there's a lot more options. Some people just aren't going to be always jumping in to buy the next, release because they already have so many other games to play.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything else to add to that.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to note, though, I think now Metroid Prime Remastered makes Metroid Prime once again the best-selling Metroid game. If you were to push all of the Metroid Prime Remastered, the original Metroid Prime release and trilogy together, I think that now makes Metroid Prime the best-selling Metroid game again over Dread.
I mean, you could. I personally wouldn't count it. You could. I personally wouldn't count it, but you could theoretically make that argument.
Yeah.
But
all right. So
there is one thing I do want to also mention about the Prime Remastered sales, and I think a lot of people, obviously, we all know that Metroid, doesn't sell well in Japan. I think everyone kind of knows that, but to really put into, I don't think a lot of people really put into perspective just how low those sales are in Japan. And I feel like even I didn't realize it, and I thought I did. But basically, the financial report, every single release on that report sold at least 100,000 units in Japan, except for Metroid Prime Remastered. Even like random generic third-party title that you'd rather play on the PS5 or the Xbox or the PC or whatever. Even those titles sold at least 100,000 in Japan. Metroid Prime, I think it just barely passed 50,000 in Japan, to really put in perspective just how little appeals to that audience. And why, that's not my expertise. I couldn't tell you that. But yeah, that's another contributor to the sales as well. Is because if you look at the overseas sales, this game topped the Kirby Deluxe, whatever it's called. The game that it came out just after Prime Remastered.
Return to Dreamland, yeah.
Yeah, it sold overseas. Prime Remastered sold even better than that did, but it was because of those big Japanese sales and those low Prime sales that it was able to I believe that sold about 1.45 million copies. So that's why it was able to just top Prime Remastered like that. And I believe same thing with Fire Emblem Engage as well. I believe overseas they at least sold similarly if Prime didn't top it.
No, I'm looking at it now. So I mean, Metroid Prime Remastered literally sold 50,000 copies in Japan, and then all the other units for outside of it. In comparison, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe 54,000, Fire Emblem Engage 43,000. Like that's a staggering difference. Whereas overseas, Fire Emblem Engage 118, or 1.18 million, whatever it is, and Metroid Prime Remastered has over 1,040,000 copies coming from overseas. Like it's just the ratio to that. Yeah, there's no other game. I mean, the closest, looking at just that like screen grab right there, Mario Strikers Battle League, which I feel like was a very lukewarm release. Even that did 17,000 sold in Japan, compared to Metroid Prime, or I'm sorry, 170,000.
Yeah, I was about
sold.
to say 100. Yeah.
Well, they do it in tens of thousands. I'm looking at these numbers. It's always throwing me
I know.
off.
Yeah.
I hate it. 170,000 in Japan compared to the 50,000. I mean, that's a huge difference. That's something I feel like I would love to talk about on the show more, and maybe either now or later. But like, what Nintendo has to do, if there is anything they can do to like really just make Metroid more. It's like the one IP they have that just Japan does not care about at all. Like, I don't know what they could do to like to change that, but I feel like if they did, Metroid just shoots up because it's an entire part of the world that just does not buy it.
Yeah, we need what we need is someone. Someone who either lives in Japan or someone who's versed in Japanese culture, who's also a Metroid fan, to like maybe explain to us, like, hey, what are the barriers of entry, for this audience? You know what I mean? Because like I would have absolutely no idea what those barriers would be.
Yeah, I think I've never really been sure over time like why it is, because I feel like maybe I've read like, oh, it's kind of like too Western sci-fi, but like sci-fi is big in Japan. Like, I don't know. It's and there's all sorts of kinds of sci-fi that's popular in Japan.
Yeah, Star Wars is big in Japan. That's like very like
Yeah.
obviously it's inspired by like, old samurai films and whatnot, but like it's very clearly like, a Western IP, and that's huge in Japan.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, I don't remember what Dread sold in Japan. I'm assuming a little bit more than Metroid Prime Remastered, but probably not that much more. But like, part of me has thought, oh, maybe it's because like console FPS wasn't big in Japan, like, which could be true, but like Dread, half the series is not an FPS. And nowadays I feel like that's kind of shifted, especially like, PC FPS have become more popular in Japan over time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely some more research that could be done there, just on our end. And then, yeah, I would love to talk to someone that maybe has like in 2023, why is it not selling? Like maybe there were different, reasons in the past, but nowadays, like why is it still not selling well?
Hmm.
Which I would be curious to know for sure.
Yeah, and that's obviously not to say that everybody in Japan does not like Metro. That is obviously not the case,
well,
especially
yeah. No, I don't think
especially if
anyone's
you've
saying
seen.
that.
Yeah, especially I don't think so. I just wanted to clarify though. Like especially if you've seen people like, Bonbon cosplay and their incredible Samus cosplays that they've done. Like obviously
Well,
there are
certainly
fans in
some
Japan,
people like it
but
because some people are buying it there, which is,
that is
like
at least
50,000 people
people
bought it. Yeah. So like, yeah, clearly some people there do like it, but I think it's interesting because I can't really, I mean, aside from the fact that like, I mean, Xbox kind of has the same issue in Japan. Just Xbox in general just doesn't sell in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a completely different, I personally off the top of my head, like, and it's not something I've really thought about or like talked about much, or like what are the different factors going into like why, a console or game might not be received well in a certain region. But I think it's an interesting thing to think about. But now something else I wanted to think about and have been thinking about since Metroid Prime Remastered has dropped in these sales numbers have come out is now how Metroid Prime 4 might sell, right? Because now we're thinking Metroid Prime 4, it could be a launch title. It could I would assume it would sell better than Metroid Prime Remastered. It's going to likely have way more marketing, we'd have to imagine, right? Probably released near the holidays, right? It's going to be a completely new game. Would have to imagine it's going to be sold digitally and physically at the same time. Doom, I can't remember what you've thought in terms of what you think Metroid Prime 4 could sell in terms of like sales numbers. So I would love if you could maybe refresh me, and then maybe if you think have your thoughts on it changed since Metroid Prime Remastered has dropped, which is why I'm asking. Now that we've seen how Metroid Prime Remastered has dropped, are your thoughts on how Prime 4 is going to succeed or not succeed changed?
I mean, not really because we haven't seen the game yet. So it's like it's so hard to tell like what those sales are going to be. We haven't seen, how Nintendo is going to push this title. We haven't seen what, when it's released, what games it's going up against. Because I mean, that's also a big factor too. Because like, Metroid Prime 4, it could be, it could be a holiday title, it could be summertime, it could release in a good spot, but then, who knows? It might also release against, Elden Ring 2. Probably not, but like who knows? I'm just spitballing in the air. And if that were the case, like it would probably get just absolutely demolished. If like it was.
Let's assume that Nintendo's doing their best to not have that happen. Okay, because yes, obviously anything could happen here, but I'm assuming like, okay, now that you've seen how Metroid Prime Remastered is done, and Metroid Prime 4 is going to come out at some point, and Nintendo, we'd assume, is not going to release it at the same time as Elden Ring 2, or release it in the middle of February, or not release it for digital, like they're trying to sell it. How do you think, have your thoughts changed on how it might sell? You were disappointed at first on how Metroid Prime Remastered sold. Is that influenced on you, like, oh, maybe people might not be as interested in Metroid Prime as I thought? Like that's kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I would say just knowing absolutely nothing about the game in general, other than Metroid Prime 4 exists, I would say Metroid Prime 4 million is kind of what I think would look really good. That's not what it needs to sell, but I think 4 million would be like a incredible, tremendous success for that game. I think for Prime 4, 2.5 to 3 million, about that Dread range, I think that would be. Now, a lot of people, if it did sell that much, would be claiming, "Oh, Metroid's dead. The series is dead. It's all over. It can't even beat Metroid Dread, a 2D game. Oh, Metroid, it's about to be put on ice again." You know that like all those Twitter posts and YouTube videos would be coming out if it hit those sales. I disagree with that. I think that would be a success. That would be good enough for us to keep getting Metroid games. But 4 million would be incredible. 5 million, and now I'm not even sure if 5 million is possible. I hope it is. That 5 million, I feel like 5 million would like change the course of the series moving forward almost permanently.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. There's one particular thing you said that I'm going to get to in a moment. In terms of what it has to sell, because I don't think it necessarily has to sell anything, but I think one mark it should hit. I think. Yeah. I actually think. In the past, I've said Metroid Prime 4 is going to sell 10 million units. I don't really think that's going to happen. If it did, I'll buy 1 million units myself.
If Metroid Prime 4 that is never going to happen.
No, I know. I mean,
never going to happen. But if it did, that would, man,
if Metroid Prime 4 sells 10 million copies, Metroid Prime 5 is coming out the next day.
That it would like
they're going to churn them out.
Nintendo would be treating Metroid like Splatoon if that was the case.
It would be treating it better than Splatoon. There would be a new Metroid game come out every year, without question.
Splatoon sell. I believe Splatoon 3 has already broken 10 million.
I don't think so. I don't think it has. I could be wrong. Hold on. Let me.
I believe Splatoon 3. Maybe I know Splatoon 2 has. Splatoon 2, I believe, is at like 17 right now.
Let me see. Splatoon 2 is at 13. Splatoon
13?
3 is at 10. Okay. So
okay, yeah. Well.
There you go.
Little off on Splatoon 2, but
little off on it. Yes. So I think personally at this point, looking at how Metroid Prime Remastered sold, how Dread sold, I think we're going to hit around 5 to 7 million units globally lifetime. Likely around 5 to 6 at launch, and then 7 lifetime maybe, or 5 launch, 6 lifetime. I think based on how Dread and then just Metroid Prime Remastered, I feel like a lot of that was sold on Metroid Prime's name alone. Personally, I think it needs to hit at least 4.12 million units sold. And why do you think I chose that number specifically?
I genuinely can't think off the top of my head what the point 12 represents.
Because the Wikipedia told me that is how many units that Retro Studios' best-selling Switch game has sold, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze.
Oh, okay.
If I'm Nintendo and I take Retro Studios and put them on Metroid, and I'm looking at them in juxtaposition of the previous series they worked on the Switch, and Metroid Prime doesn't sell more than Donkey Kong, if I'm Nintendo, I might put them back on Donkey Kong. You know, that's kind of I think if they're gonna make that changeover, I would like it to see it go over Tropical Freeze. Maybe Nintendo doesn't think that, but I think it should sell at least that.
I agree. I would love to see that.
I think it would bode well for the franchise if it did.
Obviously, we want this game to sell as many copies as possible.
No, but I mean, like, I think it bodes better for Metroid if it sells more than Retro's previous best-selling game in a different IP. Is specifically my point.
But I'm just saying regarding Donkey Kong though, like I mean hell, we already have rumors right now that there's a new Donkey Kong game being in development by a different studio, and I feel like Donkey Kong's a pretty easy IP. I use the term easy loosely, you know, armchair game dev and whatnot, but I feel like that's a pretty easy IP to like, you know, put in a different studio's hand, even a different internal studio at Nintendo.
Yeah, I think it's also, I think, to show like progression. You know, if Retro can jump to Metroid and bring it up to the same level, even better, like that looks really good not only for Retro to stay making more Metroids, but also for Metroid in general. I would love it to hit that milestone. Personally, I think 7 to 5 million units is very doable. If Dread sold, I think 3 million, I think Metroid Prime 4 can pull off. Like with marketing, with the right push, being, you know, potentially having multiplayer, more replayability, whatever it is. I think there's so much that could really hit it, but I think 5 to 7 is likely the max at this point. I would, if Metroid Prime Remaster or Metroid Prime 4 sells more than 7 million units at this point, I would be very surprised, and I think the series is a-okay. Like if even 5 million.
I was about to say
even
I would personally be surprised if Prime 4 tops 5 million, and if it does, I think like we're smooth sailing if it hits 5.
I agree with that. I wouldn't be surprised, but I agree we'd be smooth sailing. Because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, right, Metroid's not going to hit 50 million to 15 million units ever, I think. Realistically. Like, that's reserved for
No.
Mario, Zelda, Smash, Pokemon, Animal Crossing.
Yeah, that
That's
time
like
is long past for
that's it.
Metroid.
I mean, yeah, that's not happening. Then you have like the 7 million to like 13 to 14 million range, and that's like your Splatoons, your Mario spin-offs, so like Luigi's Mansion, Mario Party, and all that. I think Metroid Prime could hit that, but it would be I don't think it's do not think it's at all likely. I think if
Well, I don't
Nintendo
even. Or sorry, go on.
I would like if Nintendo makes it like the launch title for a new system, they put in mad marketing. Like there's no competition. I mean, more marketing than we've ever seen from Metroid, and like push for it combined of all the other games, I think would be required for it to hit like over 7 millions and to get into like potentially 10 million. Like that is a like system seller, like must have game at that point for the system specifically. Like it would be very unlikely. I think it could happen, but Nintendo would have to put such a push into it that they've never put into a Metroid game before.
Well, the thing is, like, in terms of for Metroid to be successful, I don't even think you need to go to those levels. I think Metroid can still be successful as a B tier franchise on the level of like Fire Emblem or Kirby specifically overseas. Obviously, Japan
Yeah.
is very different, but like overseas Kirby, Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, even I think is a great example. Like that's a very niche series that is able to sustain itself despite usually only selling between 1 and 2.5 million units.
But I think Metroid doesn't need to be niche. Like it could. I don't think every IP,
Oh,
if you push it
I
super
agree.
hard, would sell a lot. It's kind of my point. Like I don't think if you pushed every IP and put a ton of marketing behind it, it would sell 7 to 13 million units. I think Metroid Prime could, and I think there is that demand. And then obviously you're in that like 5 to 7 million range. Those are Mario spin-offs, Zelda spin-offs or remakes, Kirby. I think that's where Metroid is like getting at that point. Like it's not obviously at Mario, at Pokemon, at all that, but it could be like you said in that B tier range. Like it's right there. I think that's that I think that 5 to 7 million range is what would solidify that for me for Metroid.
Yeah.
If it hits that 5 to 7 million range, then it's like okay, Metroid's might not be tier 1, but tier 2, it's right at the top. It's right in there. It's right in the
I
middle
agree.
of the
That's
frame.
it's definitely it's the realistic goal that I think like we're as fans we're like trying to pull the franchise into.
Well, I mean, I can only do so much buying my copy, doing my part. I can, but I hope it does that well. I mean, I hate
Me with my 3 copies of Prime Remastered.
yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, I bought two. I bought 3 copies of Metroid Prime Remaster as well because I bought a digital copy and 2 physical copies. Yeah.
Yep, I got a digital copy, 1 physical US copy to keep sealed, and 1 physical Japanese copy to keep sealed for the alternate album cover. But Doom, the US copy has the same one but reversible, but then I'd have to open it, and I got to keep both games sealed. It's
Got to do it. Got to keep. I at least have 1 sealed as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So Metroid Prime Remastered overall, I think looking at everything contextually, I think Metroid Prime Remastered sold really well. Like for a 20-year-old game remaster not to sell another million units, like I think is fantastic. It shows that there's a demand for Metroid Prime, really based on name alone. Because I mean, for them to shadow drop the game, like you're essentially saying like you are not trying to sell the game at all, essentially, and assuming people are going to get it, and they did. I think that speaks volumes, really, and I don't think a lot of IPs could do that, aside from ones that are givens like Mario or Zelda, whatever it is. Overall, I know you were disappointed at first, but I'm happy to hear that you've come around a little bit. Because I think it was positive news. I was disappointed, not disappointed, but I saw some people like, oh, this like I was hoping for a lot, and I agree. Like hey man, if Metroid Prime Remastered sold 2-3 million units, I'd be over the moon. But I think even a million units is a big milestone, and with that and Dread together, I feel like that's putting Metroid in such a good spot going forward for sure.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled. I've saw some people online that
Yeah.
were like jumping out of joy, like, "Oh my God, guys, Prime Remaster sold 1 million." It's like, okay, like, come on, it's not that exciting. But on the same time, I've seen other people that are like, "Oh, series dead, game over, future." It's like, dude, come on,
Yeah.
come on.
I think
Like
to me it's very much
1 million
like
is fine.
it's very much like talking about like going on wrestling forums and talking about like ratings for episodes. Like, at the end of the day, like enjoy the game or enjoy the show or whatever it is or not, right? And I wanted to do this episode to talk about it, but I try not to get too worked up about like how much of the game sell or not, blah blah blah, like who's buying it, who's not. Like I just want the game to be really good, and I enjoyed Metroid Prime Remastered. A lot of people did too, and I think that speaks volumes on its own. And how it sold was just a depiction of how people felt about the game, which is great to see. Before we wrap up kind of our thoughts on this, we want to jump back into Metroid Prime Remastered itself as a game. Doom, I don't know if you've actually, when you went back to the game last, since you played it, I've done a couple runs on it, or 3 or 4 total now. But it's been a couple weeks since I've jumped in. So I'm not sure how much you've really thought about some of these things, but I'm curious to kind of pick your brain a little bit about it. A couple months later, top 3 things that top 3 favorite things in Metroid Prime Remastered for you. Looking back at it a couple months out, what would you say? Top 3.
Well, since the hard mode playthrough I did before we recorded episode 2 of the podcast, I believe I have not unfortunately replayed the game in full since then. I've done a couple, did a couple of Frigate Orpheon runs, just because I really love that area in general, but I just haven't really had the time to dedicate to video games in general. I haven't even had time to dedicate to Fortnite recently, and y'all know how much I love Fortnite.
We haven't played Fortnite together, which is a shame.
We should. We
need to get an Omega Metroid game, Fortnite night.
I logged on to buy the gritty emote when it was available, just to add that to my collection. It's a law. It's required.
Yep.
Yeah, you can't join the squad if you don't gritty, for real. But no, so yeah, I haven't really had much time to play that. Obviously, I was talking earlier about how I haven't had time to play Tears of the Kingdom yet. But now once I finish my capstone revisions, I'll be doing some Tears of the Kingdom. I'll definitely be doing some. I wanted specifically for Metroid Prime Remastered because in my college dorm right now, my TV sitting behind my laptop it only maxes out at 720p, but I want to play that on my big ol' 65-inch 1080p TV. For Prime Remastered, because I haven't gotten that experience yet. I've gotten the surround sound experience with my headset, but I want that pristine big picture. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Back to the topic at hand, though. After that little tangent is over now. Top 3 things I love about Prime Remastered. Obviously, first off is the visual upgrades. I think that's going to be everyone's number one thing that they love about Prime Remastered. I mean, we've talked about this so much on the podcast before, but, at least for me, I don't know about you, but for me, I was expecting at most Prime Remaster was probably going to be among that kind of Wind Waker HD, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition kind of level where, it's mostly texture work, it's lighting changes and stuff like that, which still looks really good. And obviously that would be, would still look really good with those changes, but that was kind of what I was expecting at best. And then at worst, probably like a Skyward Sword HD or a Mario 3D All-Stars.
I was expecting a Skyward Sword HD, to be really honest. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know what I expected, just because like it had been dragged along for so long that like who knew if it was going to be an actual remaster or a remake or just a re-release, a port, who knew. And for me, I was like, at this point, if they can just port it to the Switch and add dual analog and maybe make the edges a bit less like jagged, like I'd be okay with that. So I definitely didn't expect what we ended up getting. So yeah, it was great.
I remember watching that trailer and like obviously the second I saw Metroid Prime Remastered, in that little bottom when they just dropped it like so casually, I was just like, what? I'm already freaking out.
Yeah.
But the moment it really hit me was when they show the first shot of Chozo Ruins, and like I actually I did that. I did the meme face because I was just like, hold up, that's new.
Yeah,
that's new. That's not retexture. That is a new model. And then they showed Magmore Caverns, and I'm like, oh my god, the lava looks so much better now. And then oh my god, and then the Talon overworld landing sequence. Right when I saw that, I was just like, bro, this is they did it. They remade everything. This is incredible. So yeah, that's obviously my number one favorite thing about this game. My number 2, and I'm quite biased in this regard, but the soundtrack, and I'm happy about it for 2 reasons. One, I'm so unbelievably happy that they kept the original soundtrack. I
Mm.
wouldn't have mind if they did something like Xenoblade where they gave us a new soundtrack, but then also gave us the option to access the old soundtrack. But one thing I was not really worried about, but one potential concern was if they just completely replaced the music altogether, but they didn't. It's the same. You get the brand new visual presentation, which, brings the game up to modern standards, even above modern standards in, some circumstances as well.
Mm.
And but they kept the original soundtrack, which, for me is just so perfectly encapsulates what that game is about, and how the environment is able to almost escape from the TV and into your brain. And going off that soundtrack and even the overall soundscape and Folly in general, but the audio quality is significantly better because on the GameCube, all of the audio at best is downsampled to 32,000 hertz, whereas on the Switch, that's 48,000 hertz. And for those who aren't proficient in audio engineering and stuff, basically the music industry standard for audio is 44.1 thousand hertz. And so the GameCube is below that and the Switch is above that, which is about the quality that you'd expect on like films for like Blu-rays and 4K and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have this new pristine crystal clear audio, especially if you're playing on like a big surround sound system or in a headset like I do, man, it puts this game on a whole new level. And if you're a fan of the Metroid Prime soundtrack, obviously, you're gonna love hearing that rip. Someone should definitely provide that. That would be really cool.
I agree.
Wink, wink.
I agree. That'd be sick if someone did that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you said the visual updates, the soundtrack, or like just the soundtrack, and then what's your last favorite?
Probably it's a tie for me between the dual analog controls and probably honestly the new accessibility options, even though I personally don't use them. And, we were talking about this on the podcast as well. Like a Nintendo game with accessibility options in the year 2023. What is this?
Yeah.
But I think that's really cool that like people who wouldn't be able to experience this game at its prime, pun not intended, they can now, they have more options available to them to more customize the experience to their likings, and even the controls. Like there's so many control options, which again, outside of Smash Brothers, you don't really see for Nintendo games. It's like, this is the control scheme, this is what we've created for you. You better like it. Even for the Virtual Console, they took away the feature to rebind the buttons for those. But you can obviously you don't have button remapping and Prime Remaster, but you have all sorts of different ways that you can customize the controller. And for me personally, that actually really helped. I did utilize those custom control options, to be able to create an experience that really catered to me. So I very much appreciated that, because that definitely, while I was expecting dual analog, I didn't expect that level of customization.
Yeah, I wish it was a bit better, a bit like finer executed and better executed. Yeah. Like some of I wish it wasn't like sliders for the sensitivity. That was kind of dumb.
I also wish that all the options were available in the menu, because some of those are hidden in the pause menu and you can only access them in game, which I don't understand. Like, why not just have those in the menu as well? Because I didn't even know about a lot of these options until I believe someone in our own Discord server pointed it out to me.
That's interesting. I guess like the assumption is like you would only want to make those changes when you're already in game, but that's a good point. You might not even check that if you check the menus at first before you jump into the game and don't see them. Which
is what I did.
Yeah, it should be 1-to-1. Like the options should be the same anywhere. I agree. Yeah, I mean, at least for me, obviously, I mean, no, I think I was like wondering like what would be my top favorite? What would it be like, would it be dual analog or would it be the updated graphics? And, I'm looking for my phone and I know it went off somewhere. But I would have to say that coming back into it, the dual analog felt really good. I was really happy. And those are my top two favorite parts. But, like, man, the updated, like, I feel like the lighting and the new like texture specifically, and like just the models, whatever, I feel like just re-immersed me into the game. I don't think I don't think it would have been the same if like I got dual analog, but it was just the same looking game. Like it would have felt good, it would have been cool, but like I've played Prime Hack already, like I've played the game how it looks, but getting it updated entirely visually, especially in terms of like, the enemy models, the character models, and just like the lighting, like just the diffused light coming in, and how things like just looks like the glows of lichen on the wall, like, and how the water looks. I mean, fantastic. Just those kind of things really kind of bring you back into the world that I don't think just re-entering it how you've seen it for the past 20 years would really do. And that really, I think, got me really excited because, and I've said this on the show before, I didn't really, for a while, didn't care if Metroid Prime or any of the originals got brought to the Switch. It's like, I've played them before. I could play them on a mouse and keyboard, blah, blah. But then seeing it and really remastered officially, like graphically, I think just made such a huge difference and showed how much like care was put into the game. And specifically like seeing like the adult Sheegoth, like its eyes more detailed, and like, its claws and teeth and all that. And even the pirates themselves on friggin' Orpheon, you can see like the detail in their character models. It was that kind of just brought it
I love
ahead.
the new injured pirate models.
Yeah.
Like it's so grotesque, and it really really leans into those H.R. Geiger influences, and it's just it's so cool seeing Retro kind of just double down on those kind of gory details almost.
I 100% agree. My phone keeps going off, and I want to find it.
I hear it. I hear it.
It's somewhere in my room, and I don't know where it is. That's crazy. Yeah. So I 100% agree. I think you really kind of see like the original vision so much more, I think, now in a lot of ways. Like, even though it's different people who brought it together, I feel like they were able to really like, and I said this with Andy, like when we first got into it, like, this is what I remember it looking like in my head. Like, it didn't look like that, but like as a kid, you kind of fill in the blanks in your imagination. You look back on it too. Like, this is really like, I think the essential version, I think, which is really a big part of it for me. And then obviously the dual analog, awesome. Love that. Perfect. Great. But the third thing, I wasn't sure what I wanted to pick for this. And I think the third thing for me was actually the extras menu. I thought the extras was honestly one of my favorite things to dig into. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Like, once you get past like the actual game itself, like, okay, the dual analog, awesome. The game looks great. As you said, sounds great. All the accessibility options, awesome. But like the concept art, the dioramas, like, and all the added, like the old stuff, the new stuff, there was a ton of stuff in there. It's awesome. I love the extras.
The new concept art was just such a pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
it's something I was not expecting at all.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Especially because like concept art in general, like that's just not something that you really see from Nintendo in a game that much. Like if there's a collector's edition, you'll get the art book, and then you'll get the concept art in that format. But otherwise, you don't really get that stuff in game. And to have, and again, this was something I didn't even know about going in. It's not like there wasn't a Twitter post or anything that like quote unquote spoiled it, even though I wouldn't consider that a spoiler. But still, it was so nice just like opening that up and just seeing like, oh, here's a new piece of concept art specifically created from the new team at Retro for Samus's ship, something that you've never seen before. And it's like, wow, that is incredible. Here's something from Kyle Heafy, someone who we talked about on the podcast before, joining Retro Studios back when we were reporting on every janitor that got hired at Retro Studios. Now we're actually seeing the payoff for that. Like, how awesome is that?
That's actually like full circle there. You're right, and that was such a that was a stretch of time where the news reports were who was getting hired at Retro, and now we see it was worth it. I mean, I'm even looking at a screenshot right now, like the concept art, absolutely incredible. It brings everything to life, and then like one of the things I saw immediately in this game, the Parasite Queen. Like, you can see all like the breaks and ridges in its exoskeleton, and like oh my god, so good. And then the extras, you get to see it like that much better, like in even finer detail. It's really awesome. So I love that they added all that, and I feel like, again, it makes it like the essential version. Maybe it is missing it doesn't have the fusion connectivity, so maybe that doesn't make it the essential version. But it doesn't have, I think, the original Metroid, which the original release did. But are we okay with losing those things? I'm okay with losing those things personally.
I would personally like them to patch in. I feel like when you release Fusion on the Switch Online, that would have been the perfect time to release the Fusion Suit patch.
Yeah,
I think that would still be nice. I doubt they're going to do that now. I don't think we're going to see any patches for this game unfortunately, but it is a sacrifice I'm willing to make, to say the least.
100% agreed.
One thing,
Um,
one thing I also do want to add to the visuals that I would be
mm,
remiss if I didn't is, my God, the new animations. Most of
yeah,
them are really
and the
subtle,
cutscenes,
but
yeah.
most of the animation changes are so subtle. But I think they make such a huge difference in making, because the original animation, Samus feels very robotic, which is understandable. It's a 2002 GameCube game. We didn't
Yep.
have that kind, we didn't have that kind of technology
The
yet. But
technology was
yeah,
not
just
there.
yeah, yeah, we didn't have Patrick smashing the PC monitor
Yeah,
yet.
exactly.
But yeah, the subtle animation changes, they make Samus look more human, and in drastic differences, particularly that Metroid Prime boss fight cutscene. That is
Hmm.
such an insane glow up. That new running animation and that little pause she does before she uses her momentum to carry herself into the jump. So cool, so kick ass. It takes that animation alone, just takes that fight onto another level. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I love that they went back and kind of not just like put a fresh coat of new paint on it, but really went in to make things feel actually natural, I think, which I don't think the original is missing too much of that, but it really just kind of like smoothed out the edges, I think is probably the best way to look
It's
at it.
that it's that extra little coat of polish that just finishes the experience.
Exactly, yeah. All right, and then one more thing. So I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to maybe because now you haven't. I actually think this is a good question for you specifically at this time because you haven't been gaming recently. So let's say Nintendo dropped a patch tomorrow, and it was 3 features for Metroid Prime Remastered that for you you'd have to jump right back in and start playing those things. Nothing that dramatically alters the game, not oh it adds a whole new campaign or something
Yeah,
like
we're
that.
we're not we're not getting the Kraid fight. We're not getting the Kraid fight.
Yeah, exactly. But what features do you if you could add 3 features to Metroid Prime Remastered, so a randomizer, boss rush, whatever stuff like that. What do you think would be your 3 picks? If you couldn't get any other ones, just the three. What would be the most important to you?
First and foremost, update the credits. Credit everyone. That's top priority without question. Credit every single person on the original team that wasn't credited. Give the full credits to the original team, even if it's you don't even have to include it in that same credit sequence. That could be and this was actually something that Jack Matthews even suggested when Kiwi Talks interviewed him for the second time when they were both doing their kind of dual Prime Remaster review. But it's something that I think would be really nice is after you beat the game once, you also unlock the original credits that you can view separately as well in the extra menu. I think that would be a great compromise to credit the original retro team, and then for the current credits, just update that to include everyone that just wasn't featured in the original. Probably not going to happen, but that's what I would want. That's my
Yeah.
number one. That's my number one most desired feature. One that I dare say the game needs personally. The second patch, and also I doubt this will get patched because
Well,
apparently I'm
don't worry about if it's gonna get put in or not. This is if you
yeah
could
yeah
pick anything.
because apparently I'm the only one that's encountered this glitch so far. But both of my playthroughs, I have encountered such an annoying audio bug in Research Lab Ether. I specifically remember the room. It's where you encounter your first Metroid, and that little mini boss fight happens. And specifically in the second story of that room, there's an annoying audio bug, and you can kind of hear it on TV speakers, but when you're using a surround sound headset, it is really bad. It sounds like the audio is cutting in and out. It's that bad. While you're in the same room, after you leave the second story and you jump out the window and you go to the first story, the bug goes away and everything goes back completely normal. I don't know why I'm encountering this bug. It seems like no one else has encountered it, or at least no one else has noticed it. But I have, and it really annoys me, and I wish it was patched.
All right. Okay. We gotta. So so your must-have features so far are the new credits and fixing a bug. Those would bring you right back to the game.
I mean, I'm gonna come back to the game
No,
regardless,
I know.
obviously.
I
But
was
like
being
those,
sarcastic.
yeah, yeah, those are really the only two things that are
No other
I would
features that
really.
you would want to see. Nothing at
I
all.
mean, there's stuff I'd want to see, but
Okay, pick
those are
one.
like the only. I don't know, maybe
If you could pick any of
like
them.
like Like that's the thing. Like those are the first two that like come to mind. But like other than that, it's like you know what? Sure, like a randomizer. I've always I wanted to see that in Metroid Dread. I still think that's a big missed opportunity. Do that in Prime Remastered instead if you're not going to do it in Dread, or patch the fusion suit. Why not? Make Prime Remastered complete. There you go. Patch the fusion suit back into Prime Remastered. That's patch number 3 right there.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think that's kind of a larger topic. Is like, will Nintendo ever do an official randomizer mode or feature for a Metroid game or any of its games?
Yeah, Andy and I talked about that. He doesn't think that there's ever going to be a randomizer in Metroid,
I agree.
and I'm kind of inclined to agree with that too. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because I don't really know what Nintendo's thoughts on randomizers are, but at the same time, at least hearing what the Pokemon Company's thoughts are on like even Nuzlocke runs, which have nothing to do with like,
Yeah, altering the game
yeah,
or anything. Yeah,
yeah. Hearing what they think of just even that, like I can't imagine Nintendo has very popular thoughts on randomizers because that's not the way they intended you to play the game. And
yeah.
so I guess the only way I can see them doing a randomizer is if they intended it to be played that way. But it's kind of I don't know. It's with
That would
Nintendo.
have
You
had to
never
have
know.
been like that would have had to have been like a foundational like facet of Metroid from the get go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the game had to be built around that. I agree. I would be very surprised if we ever saw a randomizer. It would be really cool. I think for me, real quick, I honestly thought about this. First of all, I would love a harder difficulty, one that doesn't increase the like. I don't necessarily want like spongier enemy. I just want a harder difficulty, I guess. Like one where maybe enemies don't have more health, but they damage me a bit more, and maybe have a bit better AI and whatnot. Like a harder mode than the hardest mode, because I feel like there could be a step higher challenge, I think, in the game.
I agree with that for sure. Maybe even I don't know if it's possible in the game because maybe this would start to mess with the frame rate and the performance and whatnot. But maybe having more enemies on screen possibly could also be an addition.
I would also be down for that. Added a couple more enemies, definitely, 100%. I've wanted that. I wanted that after doing my 100% hard mode run, because I did a regular normal mode run, I did a normal 100%, and then a hard mode 100%, and I did the hard mode 100%, and I was like, it was a bit hard, but it was mostly like a test of like stamina and like getting it done, not necessarily like difficulty. Like it was gonna get done one way or another, just gonna take a little longer. And
it didn't feel like it felt harder, but it didn't feel like a test. It wasn't like it wasn't like dread mode where it's like, okay, this is a test right here.
Yeah, and I don't want dread mode. I want something in the middle, closer to hard mode than dread mode, but I wanted something that's like, I'm not going to die in a single shot, but I wanted a bit, even in hard mode, I found myself able to just like run through rooms, and just like ignore stuff, which you can do on normal. I want to go through a difficulty where I'm not going to get one shot, but I shouldn't be able to just mosey on through any room, especially in like Magmore or Phase and Mines, and just be able to just run through something and not interact with any enemies.
I should be losing more than one energy tank during the final battle. Like,
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's probably my biggest thing, is to have that a harder difficulty.
Honestly, I feel like that would actually be a really good way to increase the difficulty. Just stop dropping health during boss fights. I think that alone would be like a really cool option.
Yeah, I agree. Or like cut it in half.
Still drop missiles and stuff like that, because I feel like that's still like pretty important.
Yeah.
But like health, I think that would be a really fun addition.
Agreed. Yeah, you continue to drop ammo, but you got to manage your own health. That I definitely agree with. That would be my biggest one. Everything else would be icing on the cake. I actually think it would be really fun for Metroid Prime Remastered if there was a co-op mode. I think it would have been a really cool way to maybe bring some new people into the game potentially.
Dak, do you hear that?
What?
You don't hear Andy screaming in the background right now.
I know this is blasphemous to say this, and I don't.
He just paused Tears of the Kingdom to get on.
And I don't want this for Metroid Prime 4, but I thought maybe for Metroid Prime Remastered, it might have been fun for someone who is not really well versed in FPS games, or maybe games at all. When I think of like Super Mario Galaxy, where you could play co-op and like one person can like shoot little star bits at things, like maybe there's a mode like that where you're able to play as a floating Metroid or something and like float around and help a little bit, or maybe you are just another Samus and help out. I honestly I feel like as long as it's a toggleable option, yes, like it kind of defeats like it's not the real Metroid experience. But in my opinion, if they're not going to play the game anyway, if it's different, the difference between not playing at all and maybe playing it in a co-op version, I'd rather someone who has never played Metroid before at least try it out co-op, and see if they'd like it. I think it'd be fun. Like I would carry my mom, for example, Mother's Day theme. Like she wouldn't be able to handle Metroid Prime, but like she could. If I carried her along, and she walked around with me and shot a couple things and watched me as I did the puzzles, and all that. Like I think that would be fun. For Metroid Prime Remastered, since it's not like a main game. I don't know. That would be cool.
I say why not if it doesn't
Yeah.
impact the single player. Back in the day, we had 4 Master Chiefs running around on the screen and no one questioned it because it's a co-op experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you could have 2 Samuses running around. Why not?
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. And I think it would have been cool for like people who have never played Metroid before, to maybe give that a chance and play it with a friend. That would have been cool. I know it's kind of an antithesis of what Metroid is, but it might have been. I think more options, the better these days, and it doesn't take away from the main game. If someone walks away too far, just teleport them right back next to the main player. And then the third one, I think maybe if they had like more maybe like some challenge. I think this actually would have been fun. Maybe like specific challenges you could have done in the game, like beat the game, like in-game challenges. Maybe get a certain item in this amount of time or beat the game in this speed. I thought it'd be really cool if like the game loaded you in and you had to go into the world and like find a unit, like an enemy to kill and kill it in a certain amount of time. You have to literally hunt it around the world and like go into all the different areas and look for it and try to kill it in like a certain amount of time. Like little like challenges like that to like jump in and into the game in a different way, I think would be really cool.
We talked a little bit about the fusion suit. I would have loved to have just more skins that's something I want for Metroid in general, especially now that we have so many different suit designs. Like, give us the option to like have different little suit palettes. You could do the fusion suits, obviously. Now you could do the Dread suits. I feel like that would be like a big one to do, with Metroid Dread. Maybe if you have Metroid Dread save data, you unlock those Dread suit designs.
Yeah.
The Samus Returns suits. I think a lot of people would pop off over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that'd be cool for sure. And maybe they could tie that to some cool little challenges or whatever, like get a certain suit by completing a certain challenge in the game or something like that, and try to tie it in that way. Yeah, I think I would like to see some cool ways for them to do that in Metroid Prime 4, but it would have been fun to see if maybe they tried to be a little more experimental with it in Metroid Prime Remastered. But anyway, that was our continued discussion of Metroid Prime Remastered. We jump back into it. And now that we've talked about it, I'm going to jump back in. Maybe I won't even get Tears of the Kingdom. I'll just play Metroid Prime Remastered again on my flight on Wednesday. Who knows?
I mean, you can't go wrong either way, really.
I agree. Well, at the end of the day, I think now we both agree Metroid Prime Remastered definitely a success. Sold really, sold a solid amount of units for being, for what it was and how it was released. Over 1 million units sold, and we're looking forward to seeing how Metroid Prime 4 does and how, Metroid 6 does and all that. Looking forward to it as well. Any final thoughts here before we sign off?
Cannot wait to see the inevitable Metroid Prime 4 trailer this year.
That's the thing. We're in mid-May now. Like, when are we getting that Metroid Prime 4 trailer? Is it going to be in the next couple months? Does it come at all?
I'm expecting September because there's some rumors going around the internet right now that there's not going to be a Nintendo Direct this year, which honestly wouldn't surprise me because we didn't have a Direct last year either. Yes, the summer, yes.
I was gonna say, we've already had one this year, but this summer, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the summer, the big one, the one that everyone
like the
really
E3 one, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, that would be a bummer if we didn't get that. But I guess if there's no Metroid or DK news, I don't care.
Yeah, right. But it's kind of weird because on one hand, like it made sense last year because Nintendo, we didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, Nintendo pretty much had all of their lineup already announced, and so it makes sense they didn't have a Direct announced. But as of right now, the only other title we know about really is Pikmin 4, to my knowledge. I don't think we have any news of anything else coming out this year.
Yeah, actually the fiscal report from Nintendo said exactly what they have, at least first party wise, to look forward to. So we can pull that up right now to literally see what it says. And I'm pretty sure
Pikmin 4 and Metroid Prime 4. It's
It is.
the fours,
It is
baby.
Pikmin 4 and Metroid Prime 4. I was about to say that, yeah. And then Zelda, which hadn't come out just yet, and then now it has. So that's it. I think that's actually the biggest. I mean, Metroid Prime 4 excites me, but now it's like there's so much unknown, I think, with Nintendo at the moment. We don't know what's going on with their system, and there's literally 2 games that they've announced. We don't know what the next big Mario game is going to be, Pokemon game, like any of that. I mean, sure, a new Pokemon game just came out, but like, and there's a new one coming out like every year, but like we really don't know like what Nintendo's cooking for the most part, which I think is really interesting. Like, are we gonna get a new, announcement for a console soon? Are we about to get a bunch of new first party unannounced titles completely revealed for the first time soon? Like, I'm curious to see what's next.
My prediction is that the rumors are true and we don't get a June Direct, and it's because Nintendo is winding down their lineup for an early 2024 release of their next console. That's my prediction. This is based off absolutely no knowledge. I am purely throwing a dart on the dartboard and
That
going
would
with
be
it,
crazy,
but that
man.
is.
I mean, I can't. I mean, imagining a new Nintendo system within a
I know
year
it's I know it's so wild.
I feel like I could almost see that because I still think we're gonna get Prime. Well, I don't know if we get Prime 4 in 2024. I think we get the new console in holiday 2024. I could see that. I think we get all those things happening in about a year and a half from now. I think a new
I could see
Nintendo
that, yeah.
console early next year, I think is a bit too soon. But I agree that I think
Probably
they're starting.
early next year is probably too
I
soon.
agree though.
I was
Yeah.
more so thinking along the lines of Switch, but obviously that was a very different circumstance than what this new console is going to be being introduced into.
Of course. But I do agree at the end of the day, though, that they are definitely starting to wind down their major releases for this console, I think. And honestly, if I'm Nintendo, I'm making a new big release. I'm putting it on the next console anyway, so why
Yep.
wouldn't they be doing that? So I guess it all remains to be seen. We'll continue to find out. I'm not sure what's going on in the show next week, but I won't be around here. I think it'll be you and Andy next week, potentially. Actually, I don't know if you'll even be here.
Yeah, I was about to say, so it all depends on when we record. So usually we record on Sundays, but that is my graduation ceremony next week.
Yes.
So assuming we do record then, I will not be on the show. If you do see me, it will be either before or after that date. So y'all will just have to wait and see.
I guess we'll figure it out, but Doom, I will definitely talk to you before this, but on the show I probably won't. So on the show wise, congratulations on your graduation. I'll definitely talk to you before then, but that's awesome. Have fun and enjoy the post-grad life soon after, because that is the rest of eternity, unless you decide to go back to school, I guess. But yeah, congratulations once again, my man.
Yeah, I would have liked to play some stuff off Kanye's graduation album for this moment, but fortunately, I don't think this is the right time with the current Kanye that we've been dealt with.
with that, we will sign off here at Omega Metroid Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for joining us on the show. Of course, you can check us out on Twitter at Omega Metroid Pod. You can check my man Doominal out at Doominal Cross. You can check myself out at DaxCity_. You can also check out Andy at Spiteri316 on Twitter, or 361. It's 316, right? I feel like every time I say
316.
I feel like every time I say it's Twitter, I always do that. But
you got to be confident. Jack.
I know
You
it.
just gotta
I
go
know
with
it. Yeah, exactly. I know it. I should know that. But of course, you can also check us out at OmegaMetroid.com. We have all the latest shows, Metroid news, fan posts, definitive rankings. We have the extra shows, Andy's review show, the ROM hacks. We have those up there, the Patreon bonus shows as well.
Nowadays, ROM hacks is finished right now. He's doing
finished,
the
but
Great
it's still,
Metroid area.
It's still I hadn't gotten you cut me off at the knees, man. The ROM hack is available, but yes, the Great Metroid area ranking is also available. Andy's newest show. You can also check out his virtual theater, which isn't even Omega Metroid, but check it out. Zelda Cast as well, because he's covering Tears of the Kingdom, or the Champions Cast, Zelda Cast, and overall, check us out wherever you want to get your Metroid news. Omega Metroid is where it's at. Thank you all for tuning in on the show. 165 episodes. Crazy. But yeah, who knows who will be here next week, but we'll continue on through our Metroid journey. Thank you all for taking us on your Metroid adventures. We absolutely love and appreciate you all for tuning in every week and joining us, not only on Twitter and on the podcast platforms where you can get all your favorite podcasts, but also on Discord. Feel free to check us out on Discord. Join our official server. We're always chit-chatting on the show and or in the Discord about the show, about Metroid. It's a lot of fun. Definitely join us. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time on the Omega Metroid Podcast. Have a good night.